Welcome in. It's time for another morning espresso here on the SDH Network. I'm Jason Longshore. And look, this is a little bit of a bonus espresso for Thursday, January 23rd. I didn't think this was actually going to happen today. I thought I would be on a plane. That's a story for another time. Yesterday's travel difficulties were quite the chaotic mess. And I'll try to hop on SDH Live this morning and talk a little bit more in detail about them. But being able to brew up a little espresso for you this morning, and let's jump into it. Updates on the Atlanta United front in terms of incoming players. Miguel Almiron, Lee Ryder at the Newcastle Chronicle this morning said that Eddie Howe intends to name Miguel Almiron in his squad that will fly to Southampton tomorrow afternoon. Lloyd Kelly as well, who is linked with a move potentially to Juventus, although Juventus is now shifting their direction elsewhere as they have not been able to come to a deal with Newcastle. The move for Almiron to Atlanta seems to be edging closer and closer and closer, but it hasn't happened yet. Um, I don't think Eddie Howe is going to stand in the way of a potential move. I don't think Newcastle's going to stand in the way. I think it's down to Atlanta and Miguel Almiron to come to terms on a salary. It sounds like that's really close, according to the reports we talked about earlier in the week from Paraguay that had been agreed to. So, welcome to silly season. Stay tuned. It sounds like everything is still in motion, but it's a little bit slower than you might think. And look, the only other issue I think on the Newcastle side of this would be if they're not going to replace Miguel Almiron in this transfer window, they're talking about probably waiting until the summer. They might want to hold on to him as long as they can. So it might benefit them if this holds on until late in the window. Last time when it went the other way, remember it was on the last day of the window that the Almiron deal to Newcastle got done. So stay tuned, but nothing to indicate that things have changed in that deal. The Emmanuel Latte deal is also kind of in a holding pattern. Middlesbrough are going to need to replace him, but it gets harder for them to do that if this deal doesn't get done sooner. So you're getting down to like 12 days left in the window, and that's going to be difficult to make everything timing wise sync up. Maybe there's a little bit of consternation on all fronts in that situation. So nothing has been reported to say that both deals are not still on, but they haven't happened yet. And anytime that's the case, everybody starts to get anxious and everybody starts to wonder, and things could be moving behind the scenes that none of us know about. So stay tuned. I have not heard anything either way to indicate any changes in what had been previously reported that both deals were nearing completion and edging into that direction. So again, all you can say is stay tuned and welcome to the silliest of silly seasons when it comes to Atlanta United and Newcastle and Middlesbrough, and who knows who else at this stage. Kyogo Furuhashi, just a quick update on another Atlanta United previous target, and maybe could still be a target. I don't know. Looks like his deal to Rennes is moving closer to completion in Ligue 1. Maybe Sampaoli was able to convince his bosses of going after Kyogo, in fact, and it looks like that deal could be moving closer. We'll see a lot of talk in that about Kyogo wanting to be in a top five league in Europe. Fingers crossed for Atlanta United, and we'll keep you posted as best as things continue to develop. A bunch of other things to get into in the espresso. Let's start with the U.S. men's national team. I was supposed to be in Orlando for this. Welcome to travel difficulties during winter weather in the Southeast. The U.S. men's national team, 2 wins in this January camp, 3-1 against Venezuela, 3-0 last night against Costa Rica. Uh, Big time that you're getting these kinds of results. 3 games in a row when you go back to the Jamaica game in November with 3 or more goals scored. It's only the second time in the last decade that the U.S. men's national team has been able to accomplish that. Brian White, Caden Clark, Patrick Ajuman all scored goals. All the assists were from MLS players as well. The whole roster, except for Matko Miljevic, was MLS players. Diego Luna, Emeka Inelli, and DeJuan Jones with the assists last night. Pochettino said after the game that some of these players in this camp could be forcing their way into the reckoning for the Nations League Final Four in March. He said, "I think we now have too many players in our mind. When we need to pick the squad for March, for sure, in our mind, there are going to be many players that work here. This is why you wanted to do this camp. So you broaden the player pool and get to see people up close." Diego Luna could be one of those players. Broke his nose, went back into the game, first action, assist. And Pochettino's comments on the post-game show on TNT were hilarious. Just please go back and watch it. I will quote him. This is Mauricio Pochettino, the U.S. men's national team's coach's quote when he said, after asking Luna how he felt after breaking his nose, Luna said, "Coach, please let me keep playing because at least after halftime I'll go out." The doctor said, "Yeah, okay, you go on." First action after returning to play, it's an assist, and Pochettino said, "Big balls." Uh, Luna's got that, and Luna is just a different kind of player than we typically find in this country, and I love it. I would agree with Mauricio Pochettino in his assessment, but he's just a different guy. He's a different body type. He's a different kind of player. He's just different, and we need some of those kinds of different players. And also, I think our scouts in this country, at the professional level and at the national team level, they got to stop worrying about a traditional body type. They got to stop worrying about pure speed, pure power, all the physical aspects. They got to look for guys who can play. And Luna is one of those guys who can just flat out play. All right, Champions League yesterday, Manchester City, they had a 2-0 lead. They threw it away. They lost 4-2 to PSG, and now they might not get into the Champions League knockout round. Pep Guardiola said that City could not cope with PSG. City's got another issue on their horizon as well. They sent a request to Valladolid in Spain on Wednesday to negotiate a deal with teenager Juma, but then Juma didn't show up for training. The Spanish Football Federation confirmed that the player had deposited the necessary amount to terminate his contract. Valladolid is blaming Manchester City and Ba's agent for doing this, so basically tampering. 12 appearances by Ba for Valladolid. He came in on loan last summer from AIK Freetown in his native Sierra Leone. 6'5" center back. Valladolid exercised its right to buy him for a fee of about £840,000. Not sure how this is going to go down, but Valladolid is complaining to Manchester City, and I'm not sure who else at this stage, that this was not handled properly. Speaking of not being handled properly, clubs in Norway's top two divisions have voted to discontinue the use of VAR in their domestic leagues, and I think this is ridiculous, and it's happened in Sweden as well. VAR is not evil. VAR is down to the people who are using it. And if the video assistant referees are not being trained properly and not using it properly, that's not because of the system. That's because of the individuals and because of the training process. VAR and the process of having video assistant referees are to help get more decisions correct. If they are getting involved in other aspects, again, this is training, this is implementation. This is not the idea of having video assistant referees. I think this is extremely misguided, and I think this is probably going to be very detrimental to referees in these leagues and to the competition as a whole. We've seen far more situations where video assistant referees help get calls right that previously would not have been corrected. MLS went through growing pains with video assistant referees as well, but now I think MLS might use video assistant referees better than anybody else in the world. This is an opportunity to get it right in Norway and Sweden, and just sticking your head in the sand and saying we're not going to have video assistant referees, I think is just so misguided and so wrong. And it's going to set the game back in those countries in terms of referee development, in terms of those teams and those fan bases and that media base being able to handle playing in UEFA competitions, which will have video assistant referees. Stop blaming the process of VAR and start looking at the individuals who are doing it, like we talk about center referees and how they manage games, and start looking at the development process and the educational process that is in place to give them the tools to be able to do the job. Talked about this on Atlanta Soccer Tonight. Chelsea's women have agreed to sign Naomi Girma for a record $1.1 million fee. First $1 million transfer in women's soccer history. Best defender in the world. This is the third time in the last year or so that the women's transfer record has been broken. So exciting to see that number continuing to rise. Excited to see it over $1 million, and really excited to see Naomi Girma with Chelsea going forward. Some silly season updates. AC Milan have signed Kyle Walker on a 12-month loan from Manchester City. Buy option that is not mandatory. Manchester United and Lecce are 10 million euro apart in their negotiations over wingback Patrick Dorgu. Marcus Rashford, it looks like he's not going to go to Barcelona because Eric Garcia is going to stay at the club. Ansu Fati does not want to leave the club, so they're not going to be able to clear the salary to bring Rashford in from Manchester United unless Manchester United felt generous and wanted to pay for his salary, and they're not going to do that because they actually don't have a lot of cash on hand. Their financials are pretty good in general, but cash on hand, they're not in as good of a place as you might think. The Argentine League, as I'm wearing my Argentina jacket this morning, they extended their transfer window an extra week to the 31st of January just to create more chaos. Fernando Gago, Boca Juniors manager, they are trying to get Leandro Paredes. He is stressing patience, stressing that until the last day of the market, there will be possibilities. The new season starts today. It's a different format than it's been recently, an Apertura Clausura format. The league is split into two groups of 15. Yeah, they got 30 teams in the first division. You'll play every team in your group. There'll be 1 week where you play a team from the other group, which are the Clásicos. So you'll play 15 games in the season. Apertura, you'll play everybody home or away. Clausura, you'll play them the opposite way. So you'll play everybody home and away, essentially, that you play. Top 8 in each group will qualify for a round of 16, then a quarterfinal, then a semifinal, then a final. Yeah, playoffs in Argentina. Cue the Jim Mora clip. Single game playoffs. Higher seed will have the home field advantage. The final will be on a neutral site. Cue the chaos and disorder around the world that the team that has the World Cup trophy right now has playoffs in their domestic league. Oh my gosh. Speaking of another league that's got playoffs, MLS, Wilfred Zaha, he is going to Charlotte. That's the biggest move that they have ever done. It's on loan from Galatasaray. We'll see if he adjusts. We'll see how he does in Charlotte. Huge move on paper. Another big move on paper that's going to fly under the radar a little bit, Mark Delgado. He is going from the Galaxy to LAFC, $400,000 in GAM split over 2 years. Uh, Galaxy are dealing with salary cap issues, and they're also dealing with trying to replace Ricky Pooch for the season due to injury. So they're having to get creative, and they've had to move Delgado, Brugman, Neal to try to make themselves compliant and also make themselves as good as they can possibly be. San Diego, they have added a Danish winger, Andres Dreyer. Venezuelan striker Kevin Kelsey is back with MLS in Portland after spending some time in Cincinnati. LAFC also signed Igor Jesus from Portuguese top flight side Estrela Amadora. He had previously been with Flamengo, winning 2 trophies there in Brazil. Real Salt Lake, they sold their 19-year-old goalkeeper Gavin Beavers to Brøndby in Denmark. They've signed veteran Brazilian goalkeeper Rafael Cabral, who was a free agent last with Cruzeiro and Grêmio in the Brazilian top flight. Some other moves from Tuesday you might have missed. Luca de la Torre on loan from Celta de Vigo going to San Diego. Austin have signed Besard Sabovic. He is coming in as a free agent last in the Swedish top flight. New England, they've signed Demario McIntosh to a homegrown deal. Chicago have signed a homegrown as well, Robert Turdine. It is the second largest deal for a homegrown player in MLS history behind Kevin Sullivan. Columbus, they signed a goalkeeper Stanislav Lapkis to a homegrown deal. I don't know, maybe they should have done that last season when they had goalkeeper issues and they didn't have a goalkeeper on the bench for a game. Instead of all the complaining about not wanting to sign a guy to a deal and yada, 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 yada. They were always going to sign Lopkis. We saw it coming if you've paid attention to MLS Next Pro. Ryan Mara has retired the New York Red Bulls goalkeeper, 12 years. Spent all of those with the Red Bulls, but one on loan to NYC in 2015. Backup primarily in his career, but Dax McCarty said this on Twitter. I know we play the if game with a lot of different things in life, but I genuinely believe that if he doesn't get hurt during his first season in 2012, he goes on to win Rookie of the Year and be the starting keeper at Red Bull for a decade, maybe longer. He was that good. High praise from Dax McCarty for Ryan Mara. Martin Anselmi, as we move down to Mexico, he's no longer Cruz Azul's coach after accepting the offer from Porto in Portugal. He's not going to manage match day 3 in Mexico against Puebla. That could have been his farewell. Things have gone really badly with Cruz Azul since he was negotiating with Porto. He's not signed with Porto yet, but it's so bad with Cruz Azul that according to TUDN and Adrian Esparza Oteo, his departure is done. He's not going to stay at Cruz Azul, even if the Porto deal for some reason falls apart. One last one on the Espresso this morning. We talked about Indonesia and their kind of urge to get into the World Cup to the fact that they made a coaching change when they were in a good position. Uzbekistan, they've had to make a coaching change as well, different reasons, but they could potentially qualify with games resuming in March. Sreko Katanek, the manager, has had to resign citing health reasons. He's got Uzbekistan in second place in their World Cup qualifying group right now. They could qualify for their first World Cup, but they're going to need a different manager to do it after Katanek has stepped down. SDH Live this morning, starting at 9:05. YouTube, Twitch, X, Facebook. Pick your poison. You can watch on all of those. You can listen later on demand wherever you get your SDH podcasts. And it is Thursday, so the Power Hour is in the second hour of the show. Nino Torres, Goal TV commentator, joining from Peru. He will talk about Portugal. He will talk about South America. And Nico Moreno from Pulso Sports and the Soccer Bar. He will join at 10:30 from Seattle to talk about everything MLS, everything this hemisphere, everything Seattle as well. Nino and Nico in hour number 2 of the show this morning, and the Espresso will be back tomorrow. Join me then.